Welcome to today's webinar, everybody, with Propelics and Convey. My name is Steve Brickman. I'm a mobile strategist with Propelics, and it's 2017. Jumpstart your mobile program already. That would be my grandmother's title for this webinar. Just a reminder, we also have 20+ hours of valuable webinar material up on our website at propelics.com/resources as well. So be sure to check those out. And lastly, please feel free to submit your questions at any time in the Q&A or in the chat windows, and we'll take them at the end of the presentation. So just quickly a bit about us. Propelics creates mobile strategies and world-class apps for the enterprise. Founded in 2011, Propelics founders and employees are deeply rooted in enterprise experience, and frankly, it's where we feel we can have the greatest impact and provide the most benefit. Propelics delivers its products and services to Fortune 500 companies worldwide, and we are 100% focused on digital and mobile for the enterprise. Lastly, we have offices in San Jose, in Boston, where it's currently a freakish 65 degrees out, in Pittsburgh, and in Guadalajara. So really quickly, because today's webinar is totally packed with content to get through. So what we do, Propelics provides enterprise mobile strategy services, everything from mobile road mapping to scoping and prototyping to UI UX design, IT strategy, testing strategy, and strategy around emerging technologies. We also provide soup to nuts app development and support, including setting up and maintaining your mobile center of excellence, as well as providing mobile app testing as a service and Tier 2 and 3 support for mobile apps. We also offer 3 homegrown mobile products: Auto Here, Exact Meeting, and Lead to Capture. And lastly, the Emerging Technology Council is a community of thought leaders in technology that provides personal guidance and exclusive access to insider information and materials. So join the ETC today. More information at emergingtechcouncil.com. And if I could just get a little personal for a second. So here's just a few of our clients. One of the best things about working for Propelics is the breadth of experience. We work with Fortune 500 clients around the world and across all industry verticals. So every job is different, and we're constantly encountering new problems to solve. And it's just always a wonderful, exciting challenge. And now over on the Convey side, founded in 2011, Convey has been a pioneer in the mobile backend as a service market and was named a leader and the #1 mobile development platform in the recent Forrester Wave. They beat out giants including AWS, IBM, and Microsoft. This speaks to their comprehensive application development and ongoing delivery cloud-based platform. What's great is their customers told Forrester that they consider Convey a partner, not a vendor. And they're succeeding due to their focus on providing not only a comprehensive feature set, but also by providing developers with a great experience. They just log in and start developing, basically. So there's no need to build or maintain any infrastructure or middleware services. They handle it all. And with Convey, every winning digital strategy includes a mobile platform. And Chikku will speak to this in more detail in the presentation. So let's just move on to some Convey clients. Convey's award-winning platform is trusted by organizations across a wide spectrum of industries. Convey has over 30,000 B2B, B2C, and B2E apps running on Convey. And here's just a sampling of the companies that rely on Convey for their mobility platform, for mission control apps, and for new digital businesses. So today we'll have two speakers. Firstly, Erik Karlsson, partner and co-founder of Propelics. Erik is a seasoned leader with a keen eye for emerging technologies. He's well respected in both technical and business circles due to his ability to match the right amount of technology geekiness with business understanding to craft truly unique solutions. As a seasoned executive with startups through successful exits to his name, Erik has the experience to advise companies on the discipline and objective approaches needed to turn ideas into reality. Chikku Bannet is an information technology executive with leadership experience in technology and business strategy, product definition, and development and delivery. He's focused on evangelizing and selling emerging technologies and products to global 1,000 customers, and he is the VP of Product Engineering at Convey. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Erik Karlsson, and welcome to 2017, and let's jumpstart your enterprise mobile program.
Thanks, Stephen, and really nice to have everybody on the call today. I see some current clients as well, so welcome and thank you for joining. Today's conversation with Chikku and I, we've been talking about this webinar for a little bit of time, and now that we're kind of ending up the first 2 months of the year, we still have conversations with organizations that are somewhat struggling in terms of jumpstarting and trying to get moving within enterprise mobility. So today we're going to talk a little bit around either whether you're starting out or whether you're rebooting some of your enterprise mobile strategy and roadmap. This is not going to be a conversation to convince you around the value of enterprise mobility. There's no mobile is huge graphs. There's no slides around the mobile growth stats to convince you that enterprise mobility has value. If you're on this call, it probably means that you already believe that, or you've dabbled into some applications, or you've started to move some things forward, and maybe you've been having success with that and trying to kind of parlay that success into more, or you've struggled a little bit or trying to really kind of get over this mobile hump type of idea. For us, enterprise mobility is much about company culture and communication, frankly, as it is around some of the apps and technology. And so we're going to talk a little bit around some of these types of things today and try to give you some hints and tips around this. This webinar is being recorded. We will make this recording available as well as a copy of these slides. So this will all be available for you guys after this call, probably tomorrow. So from our perspective, enterprise mobility is it's an old term. It's obviously, we've been doing it for quite a long time when you start looking back into ruggedized devices that have been, in manufacturing or logistical type situations. For us, the newer term for that, or the way that we've been trying to be able to reboot the idea of what an enterprise mobile strategy means, is that for us, it's the art of driving both qualitative and quantitative business benefits through the transformation and or simplification of business process. And we try to do that through mobile solutions, whether that be to employees or maybe to partners or other kind of constituents, we would say. We're not going to talk too much around consumer mobility in this call. So those some of the strategies that we're going to talk about are equally as valuable when you start talking about customer-facing apps. But we're going to talk a little bit more about applications towards the internal constituents, if you will. A really easy way of thinking about this is that we continually try to find new ways to solve older problems. And older problems doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that we're just rebuilding a new way to solve something we have solved in the past. But typically it means that we're trying to look at what we do and how we do it, and are there better ways to be able to go after those things through this platform and through this type of idea. So most of our clients really fall into, I would consider, two separate types of profiles. One, we do work with a lot of firms that are executing a strategy of transformation in some sort of way. They're looking at what they do. They're looking at the business processes of how they make money or how they execute associated to that revenue stream. They are going through those mobile use cases. They're looking to also accelerate or really standardize on some of this innovation that we see, which is good. We also have clients that see the value in mobile use cases, but they haven't gotten quite there in terms of building the momentum yet. Either they haven't started, or maybe they have, very common today is, we bought an MDM or we licensed an MDM product in 2012. We have email contacts calendar, PIM type stuff. We maybe have some small number of third-party apps in the App Store. Maybe we've developed or dabbed a little bit in custom development, but we really haven't gone anywhere with that. And there's a lot of question around, is this valuable? Are we getting ROI around the tools that we have? Are we performing kind of more random acts of mobile type of idea? So if you're in this second bucket, that's really what this webinar is going to try to be around. And if this sounds familiar, or if there's some things in here that kind of ring true, then you're in the right place. So with that today, since we only have 45 minutes, we can't solve everything, but with that today, we're going to talk about 3 specific ways to jumpstart some components of mobile this year in 2017. And so I'm going to talk a little bit around how to build something valuable and what that means and what the definition of value means and how to find those types of use cases and how that can be used. Chikku is going to talk a little bit more around using modern tools to solve more modern problems. And mobility can generate some new modern problems, such as mixed connectivity, online, offline, small screen type things, many different platforms, et cetera, which we haven't had to deal with in the past. And I'm going to come back at the end and talk a little bit more about how we take a first good win and something that is delivering value, and how do I really roll that into more and start building some momentum around those types of things. So in the meantime, like Steven said, ask questions in the Q&A panel. If they're really topical, we'll try to interject that, or we'll have some time at the end to be able to walk through those as well. So the first one is around building something valuable. And it sounds very simple to be able to say, oh, of course we're going to build a mobile application that's valuable. Why would we build something that doesn't, that isn't? And a lot of that we've seen is that definition of value and what is truly valuable, and what does it really mean in terms of when an application starts building, following, and is used over a long period of time. That value is typically around a couple of different types of metrics. And what we've seen in the past is that those metrics that really translate into core value in enterprise mobility typically change some of the core ways that we measure success. So what I mean by that is a lot of organizations have some difficulty in terms of trying to question how do we work today? Meaning, what are some of the tools that we use? What's some of the processes that we follow? What information do we consume, and why am I consuming that data? So if I'm performing a specific business process, I might have a significant amount of information available to me. What do I really need to consume to really have a strong impact? And what do we create in the field? Like, what impact do we want to be able to have in that situation in the business process, and what kinds of data do I want to be able to capture out there? And one of the last one is really around how we communicate, and how do we transfer and exchange information around a specific example. And a lot of times, enterprise systems and some of the IT programs can actually impede a little bit of how we kind of question some of these kind of basic tenets around how we work and how we consume and how we create data. A lot of core systems are built more around the system of record. So you have a CRM system, I have an ERP system, I have something that's capturing financial data, I have a sales forecasting information, I have other types of things. But if I'm in the field maybe doing a set of processes, I don't need all of those different systems of record. I need 5 or 6 pieces of data across many systems of record to make sure that I'm effective, or I can do a specific task, or I can close a deal, or I can service this customer, or I can do whatever. And when you start thinking about that, and we start thinking about creating applications, or start questioning in terms of how we work, and kind of going after the process of the day instead of the system of record, you start having some small epiphanies around building small, valuable types of applications, or even access to pieces of information that can kind of fundamentally change some of the core metrics that we use to measure success. And so a lot of these core processes we talk about are really, we follow today are really built in a world before we had this technology. Like I have a device in my pocket that is a large screen. It has 2-day battery life. It's always connected. I have a tremendous amount of connectivity and very fast connectivity. I have GPS, it knows location. I have camera access. I have maybe like Bluetooth or other types of LTE type of devices around me where I can actually drive some other information. We're starting into things like augmented reality, other types of things. How do I use these small technologies to go after some of these core things? And it's really a different way of thinking. It's a different way of creating change within the business. And so not every application needs to be transformative. And so we've been using this maturity curve for a very long time within the business, and it's actually held really true when we first created it about 5 years ago. And that idea around that we start seeing on the left-hand side here, a lot of good applications that access data, where we might have system or kind of generic document access, or we have some simple collaboration tools and some things like that. We start moving into applications that improve access, so maybe accessible or being extend out some ERP or CRM system information or other types of things, but things that generally save time or might have some ability to increase revenue. And we also are always looking for these apps that kind of transform organizations. Like, how do we work? How do we communicate? Can we find better ways of doing these core processes through a device that is much more powerful and much more accessible than anything that we've had in the past? And it's really difficult to start thinking about that. So to answer the question, we start with a small process, and this process you guys can anybody can use. It's pretty straightforward. We try to first go after and identify what some of these core business drivers are that we feel we can change throughout these types of technologies. We look from a competitive perspective. We also look like across industries and see, like say in retail, we look very closely at banking, or we look at services industries and things like that to see what types of use cases are coming out there and vice versa. We also obviously capture a lot of customer or kind of employee feedback around those types of things. And we start building a really a high-level set of scenarios or use case ideas and ways that we can change or ways that we can transform some of the process that we want to be able to get into. We do a lot of work in terms of visualization and building app prototypes. We do a lot of work in terms of kind of prioritizing this. I'm going to walk through this a little bit. That first piece I mentioned was really related to the drivers and trying to define what does value mean to us. These are kind of core example business drivers, but we also have, we typically try to start with something that is a mix of drivers that are both quantitative in nature, things that we feel that through the use cases and the ideas that we have, we're able to fundamentally change some quantitative type of metrics. And then we look very closely at qualitative type of things, that we feel that we can change maybe a customer experience with us, or we can change an employee experience in terms of how they access that data, or find different ways to be able to build really good user experiences around that. And our user experience can have as much effect on somebody's perception of value as much as some of this core underlying technology or some of the core data that we're providing. These are examples, so customer satisfaction or current customer growth, or this is efficiency. This is for a service example, or the efficiency of a driver, other types of things. But we're trying to find ways that we feel we can take their use cases or ideas and work them against these types of drivers to say, all right, where is that benefit? We also do a lot of work that I think is always very valuable, and the best use cases that we've always found have not been in a conference room. They have been out somewhere, following, watching, being able to live in those shoes. I know the folks at Propelics, we've been in every single situation, from automotive floors to delivery drivers to working POS and retail to within pharmaceutical organizations, healthcare organizations, everything, where we're trying to understand how people really work and what types of data they're consuming and what times, and how do we kind of bring these things together. Day in the life, we have a bit of a methodology around it, but it's an extremely valuable way to get away from things that are perceived as value and trying to find things that truly are valuable, and ask tough questions out in the field to say, why are we, what are you trying to be able to do here? What types of information are you trying to be able to get to, et cetera. And then after you kind of do that, you have to pull that back together and start looking at those results, having some of that work around process ideation, being able to have a leadership viewpoint in terms of where we might be headed, and what types of larger maybe industry or market pushes there might be, have the right people involved that have a forward-thinking attitude around the processes that happen. That could be either folks who've been there for a very long time or folks that haven't, and have some real true honesty around the outcome of what we're hoping to change. And obviously, part of this as well is not just going out and being able to create all these innovative and types of use cases, but they have to be prioritized and based in some sort of reality. And so we do a lot of work, and something I would definitely recommend is to do some heavy-duty prioritization of those ideas. So as those ideas come back, be able to make sure that we align those to the drivers that we just talked about, be able to look at how ready are we to actually execute these ideas, so such as, do we have the data, is the content there, do we have, is the process available to us to be able to change, do we have stakeholders or kind of leadership example and support around those types of things, and how much change is really involved in that, maybe from an implementation perspective or cost, et cetera. And we try to find ways to do a strong mobile roadmap where we're balancing out not just use cases that we feel are valuable, but things that we feel that we're ready for as a business, and we feel that our users are ready for in terms of the amount of change that we have, and also things that are not horribly complex and horribly or costly. It's very difficult to have some of your first initial mobile applications ideas be some of the most expensive, or have those be something that is going to be prohibitive in terms of trying to get enough people involved or have enough cost involved to be able to do that. Chikku's going to talk about this as well. And so it's a nice simple way to kind of work that down to an idea around viability. And how do I start thinking more about some of these use cases? You know, we do a lot of our work in enterprise mobility, but we think that this is just the first piece of this. I know there's a lot of talk and hype or just discussion out there around IoT, and you start talking about machine learning or cognitive or AI and augmentative or virtual reality, those types of things. These are technologies, right? They're not necessarily solutions, but they are technologies that we definitely feel that enterprise mobility plays a baseline role in how we drive some of these, how can we use these technologies to drive bigger benefits? And we think a lot of that interface will be still through a mobile device. So when we start thinking about, like, say, machine learning, this is one of the areas that we feel is really one of the largest benefits that we have. Our whole business is around taking complex processes and a lot of data elements and all this different types of stuff and trying to build really elegant user experience to provide the right information to the user. This idea of being able to take a tremendous amount of data sets and being able to allow that server-side piece to look at trends, to be able to find issues or anomalies, or be able to find specific pieces of intelligence in that data and present that back to the user is really exciting, and something that we feel that enterprise mobility fits really well into. AR, wearables, those types of things, obviously we're always looking for ways to not only look at the information that we have, but how can we actually integrate that a little bit better with what the user is actually physically experiencing. Obviously, we do day in the life and things like that where we know kind of what that is, but to actually take that information and bring that forward a little bit and integrate that a little bit more is really exciting. And obviously, we've been doing micro-location, other types of things, and we start looking forward around bots or a little bit more AI and cognitive. Like, it's just, there's a lot of really good opportunities for us to be able to use technology to go after some of that core benefit. So an example of that is we do some work for Cintas. This is a good example of being able to take this wasn't their first application, so it's not necessarily something that they start out with, but to be able to, the idea around kind of questioning some of the core underlying system of record versus process of the day type of thing. Cintas has a tremendous amount of deliveries. They do uniform service and other types of things. You guys are familiar with them. Those drivers, they call them SSRs. There's about 6,000 of them. Their previous system was a little bit more built around some of the system of record. So they would jump between different aspects of data the way that they had it built for on the back end. And they went through a large ERP transformation. And then through that, we had the opportunity to rework the application and build that application much more around how the driver executes their day. When they show up to a site, how they get to there, the hazards available on there, being able to quickly be able to do scans of dirty garments, be able to quickly create invoices, other types of things. And we were just talking about this with another client as well. One of the big things here is that they only have a very small amount of time in front of their customer. So they have a phrase called second set count, where when a driver comes in, they might only have a few minutes maybe with the customer and they don't see them for another week. And so how do we make those 60 seconds the most valuable thing, because that might be one of the only interactions they have with us as a business. So we see that all over the place, retail and logistics and delivery firms and all sorts of services firms, et cetera. And the idea of being able to take that process a day and be able to provide some real value in there is pretty exciting. So really, to wrap up this first thing around building something valuable, group activities with the business and IT leadership, get out there and do day-in-the-life road trips, be able to experience different types of users and different users within those user types across different regions, because a lot of businesses that we work with have different kind of muscle memory related to process across regions. Ideation sessions, I think, are great, having the right people there in the right and the right type of environment to think differently and to be able to really kind of get into a core process and what we need within there. Outside influence is a great thing. Guidance for facilitation, like having somebody outside to ask questions like why do we do this way? Being able to build some process and a scenario roadmap and trying to simplify and simplify and simplify to try to get rid of things that are not core necessities to what we need to get done. And lastly, I mean, we try to make things very small and experiment and try to take risks in certain areas. And so we do a lot of work around prototyping, try different ideas and processes. We try to, force our team and you should as well to not try to solve every process issue. So maybe if somebody still needs to pick up a phone for that 1% case, then that might still be better than trying to build that into the application when 99% of those cases can be handled by something that's very simple and quick and elegant. And we try to keep budgets small. I think that's a really good way of questioning value and trying to be able to start with something that we feel is very manageable and something that, maybe 8 to 12 weeks to be able to release something that is core to the business and try to build that first win around that. So keeping budgets small actually kind of brings us to our next topic, and Chikku's going to talk a little bit around how enterprise mobile and how some of the new tools today we try to use a little bit more modern tools to solve more modern problems.
Thank you, Erik, and welcome everybody to this webinar. So now that Erik has talked to you about how you decide to build something of value, I'd like to talk to you about assembling the right team and tools to do the job. And as Erik pointed out, these modern problems that you're going to be faced with require sort of modern tools to tackle these problems, and there have been a lot of advances that have taken place that you can leverage. These are the same advances that enable a small team of people, a group of high school kids, for example, build a really hit app in the App Store and have millions of users using it, right? And how can you leverage some of these same technologies to really tackle these problems and build some of these really hit 5-star user experience applications? And that's really what I'd like to talk about in this section. So as you move closer to thinking about the actual app you want to build that is core to your business, you immediately start to think about the complexity of the problem that you're faced with, because really once you start thinking about this, you realize that this is all about enterprise integration, and enterprise integration has traditionally been a very complex problem and therefore deemed to be very risky. You'll find a lot of stakeholders in your organization pushing back, saying, oh, wait a minute, before we really embark on something like this, we really need to understand what our strategy is going to be. How are we going to deal with this complexity? And our previous experience is what guides us, and the previous experience tells us that this is going to be complicated, time-consuming, expensive, risky. But there's really been a lot of advancement, like I said, that have happened that can disrupt some of these long-held assumptions. And one way that we find it's very advantageous to do to to deal with this complexity is to actually start to break it down, and divide and conquer is one way to look at it, right? And in order to take this out of the abstract of hey, there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of risk, and stakeholders pushing back, it's important to start, we feel, from the application in and look at what it really takes to build an enterprise mobile app. What do I need? And then start to break down the various pieces into multiple categories like we have here, and dig into each of these categories and try to understand what do I need to do, and what's the right tool for the job. So one of the first things you're going to need in the top right of the screen are just an development environment and associated development tools for the front end of your application. That's pretty obvious. It's something you're going to need. You need to get data in and out of this application, and you need to be able to do that securely because you're talking about the enterprise here, and therefore the data needs to be secured and performant as well. It needs to be very responsive because that's really what is going to engage your user and get you a 5-star user experience. An often ignored part of an application is all of the back-end services labeled here as middleware services that you're going to need to get the data delivered to the right place, orchestrated from multiple different back-end sources maybe. And every application, when people think of these applications, they only think of the front end of the application, but every application has a front-end component and multiple back-end components, and these are the services that you need to think about as well. And last but not the least, often ignored until the very end, is operating this application. Once it goes live, who's going to manage all these services, monitor them, scale them, all of these things that are very important, again, to the user experience. So as we build these categories out, on the front-end side, you obviously have the UI, UX design that you have to pay attention to. You have to pick the tools you're going to use to actually develop the application, whether you're using a rapid mobile application development tool labeled RMAT here. You can use native iOS, native Android, maybe develop in Swift on the iOS side and native Java for the Android side, or use one of these hybrid tools. How you're going to deal with crashes and crash analytics. And then when you get to actual data delivery to the app, you need to think about things like, does my app work offline? This is very, very important when you're looking at your application and the user experience when the user is, maybe doesn't have a reliable data network or doesn't always have a data network. What about encryption of the data at rest? In transit. How do I make it easy for my front-end developers to not have to worry about the back-end systems of record that Erik was talking about, whether they are for data or for authentication or data authorization. And then in the middleware category, you, again, need to build these services to orchestrate data from multiple different sources. You need to be able to cache the data, so it's, very performant from a front-end application user's perspective. You might need new data storage and file storage to persist things for this new application that you're building. You need to deal with identity management, whether you have to have new identity management or integrate with something that you already have. And finally, the operations piece, monitoring, the scaling, troubleshooting, diagnosis, end-user support. If it's going to be an app that has some compliance aspects to this, how do I ensure that? So this gives you a view of, breaking down this complexity into different parts and looking at it. And this is our perspective. There's also an analyst perspective to this, right? Forrester has this 4-tier architecture for a modern application architecture stack. Gartner has something very similar, and they break it down very similarly, right? There's a client tier, which is really the front end of the application, and again, this could be a mobile app, wearable, IoT, really multiple experiences from an end user perspective that you want to cater to, and then there's a delivery tier, right, which is really how do I now, once I've decided what that client tier looks like, how do I make sure I can securely and in a high performance way get the information in and out of this client tier. And this is where the abstraction happens, where you don't want to be tied down by your systems of record, so you use an aggregation tier and a services tier to separate out those systems of record, so your client and delivery tiers don't have to necessarily be impeded by, what's happening in those back-end tiers, or for your developers to have to learn how to talk to those various systems of record and fetch data and so on. So this is an analyst view again that is very similar to the way we looked at things completely from an application perspective. So the question is, given that you have this complexity and we've broken it down into various categories, how do you go about dealing with this, right? So you can build it all yourself. This is analogous to, building a kit car. You have a bag of parts. Some of them you already have, maybe some of these modern technologies that you have to buy, and you put it all together. But you're back again to dealing with the complexity, risk and, how much time is it going to take, how much money is it going to take to put this all together by myself versus, the other analogy that we have here is, hey, how about just getting this car right off the assembly line and being able to leverage the fact that this is battle tried and tested by lots of other customers, and their experiences, good and bad, have been put into that product that you're buying. So rather than building it all yourself, you're just buying it. And that's essentially what Kinvey provides for you as a product. So if we go back to our picture of what does an app really need, and you look at that breakdown, everything that you see here shaded in orange is really what Kinvey provides for you out of the box. And so this is a mobile backend as a service. It's built, optimized for you to be able to create these experiences. And we provide all of these things right out of the box, so you don't have to worry about this. Think about this. It's ready to go. You can simply go to Kinvey.com, for example, today, sign up, and you have all of the features in orange here available to you, ready to go. So you don't have to worry about setting up infrastructure, learning new tools, putting together tools, any of those things. So, that's what we mean when we say right tool for the job. And as was pointed out earlier, this is a BaaS platform that has been ranked both by our customers and analysts consistently at or near the top of other tools in the stack. So really, the goal of this section is to tell you, break the problem down, use the modern tools, part of which is having a backend as a service platform that is built for mobile, but more importantly, be able to bring your own application development platform. So you're not, again, impeded by having to go a specific route for your front-end application development. You are free to choose the tools you want to choose to build the front end of your application, and then utilize the BaaS for all your back-end needs, including integration, as well as covering you once you start to operate this application, because we do all the MBaaS takes care of all the management, monitoring, scaling, integrating with your continuous integration, continuous deployment tool chains, so you can continue to maintain this application and scale it moving forward. So with that, I'm just going to hand it back to you, Erik, to talk about bullet 3.
You bet. Thanks, Chikku. So that taking that idea forward and trying to, now that we've talked a little bit around trying to find the right application idea and realizing that there's a lot of smart ways to be able to integrate with those back-end systems and be able to accelerate and take advantage of those types of things. A lot of companies kind of struggle with the idea or kind of taking one first application and looking more towards taking that first win and rolling it into others. And we've always said that an application itself is not a strategy. That is not just the fact that we have one application doesn't mean we're mobile enabled, or doesn't mean that we have the ability to repeat that success or other types of things. So, and when we talk to most firms, they say they have a bit of a mobile strategy. Many of those are really more device strategies, maybe not necessarily a vision of how we are trying to transform through mobile. And really, like I've said before, the mobile and these technologies are just enablers to that. On their own, they really do nothing. And so trying to identify and building a roadmap forward in terms of where do we innovate, what types of processes are held sacred we do not touch, or we don't touch where there's so much interconnectivity we can't really make a lot of change within there. How much change can we absorb maybe as a team level or over a period of time? Are the applications that we're thinking about and some of these use cases and the prioritization I talked about before, are they actually working towards a vision for mobile use, or are we really performing more random acts of mobile where we find a good idea and we go build it, we find a good idea, we go build it, and we look back in 3 years, we say none of this stuff ties together in any sort of way, or we're just kind of solving small point solutions and how we bring this forward. And even a strategy in terms of do we buy or build? And what do we as an organization want to invest in, and what do we feel we can get externally? And there's a tremendous number of high quality, really good cloud-based or even on-premise-based enterprise mobile solutions. And more are coming. It's a huge market that's growing. So where do we want to be able to do that? Most of our time that we're spending time with organizations helping build an idea of a portfolio and starting to look at, from a vision perspective, what types of process change and what types of pieces come together to help support either at a per group level or at a organizational structure level or something. This is an example of an app portfolio we completed in the last couple months where we looked at different types of groups, sales and marketing or manufacturing or leadership, other types of things, and came up with some ideas around what type of applications and what needs were we trying to be able to fulfill within that. And we had to take and break those out. So not only do we work at the viability, but we want to say, you know, what are things that we can, away from what's available, we want to find, number one, define that portfolio, and then say, what types of applications do we have, maybe as an extension of existing platforms, maybe like a CRM app or an ERP app of some sort that we can satisfy a need from something that we either have already, or maybe it's applications that we want to go acquire and find something that that we think is a good mobile solution where it meets the needs that we have and go dig it up off the shelf or have somebody else be able to take and support it. And which ones do we want to build that we feel these are core to the business, they're core to our differentiation, that's how we make money or that's how we grow the metrics that we care about. And so typically that we see is that in that, if I go back to that same maturity curve that we talked about before, we see that the left-hand side here, these apps that access or apps that improved, usually those are extend and acquire type applications, meaning that we're trying to find ways that we can go take opportunities to find things in the marketplace to fill those holes and be able to have that be supported by somebody else. Those ones up in the upper right, typically if we're building applications and we're building things that we have to maintain or support or have to do types of things, we want to make sure that they're things that are core to what we're doing, that they're driving transformation, that they are things that we couldn't just go find in the marketplace, that we're building around our process of the day, not just a random process of the day or a system of record. And there's things that we feel that we can tweak and iterate over time to have a really good core competitive advantage. A lot of times when we walk in organizations, we see a lot of application development work that's happening in the left side of this chart. Things that are either available or somebody didn't pass a specific security concern because there wasn't good security documentation, so they rejected it, so we're going to go build it. Some sort of idea or reason on why we're building something that's already available someplace else. It's really, knowing that this is not going anywhere, and mobility we feel is an area that will continue to grow, and these devices will continue to change. It's not something we're supporting for a year or 2 years or 5. We think this is something that is going to be a part of the organizations we're working with for decades to come and beyond. Then how do we look at what do we really truly want to build and support and manage? So after that, the other piece of this and kind of helping, another piece of being able to take that first one, is building momentum. And having that first win is one thing, but how do you start taking that and being able to extend that out? And so a lot of times we also help customers on building standards and the idea of having repeatable services of how we execute. UX standards, navigation, branding type of things. Maybe it's application architecture or even solution architecture, things like bringing Convey in, something that could be used on one solution and can be extended out to be handled on multiple set of solutions that are kind of in that upper right part of that diagram I showed. Having communication internally that these services exist and creating a culture around innovation and having people bring ideas to the table. How do you start doing those innovation workshops and some of the other things I talked about across different types of groups? How do you show successes? And how do you say to different teams who might been in the organization a while who don't believe that we can change, and start building some of those growth areas and some of those communication of some of those successes? Ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build standards and repeatability where even if it's developed internally or even by a third party externally, we know we're doing that in a much more consistent manner. That's ultimately going to be faster to deliver. It's going to be inherently more secure because we're using repeatable components that we've vetted. It's more repeatable and it's something that we can take and be able to repeat over multiple different type solutions, and ultimately more supportable, meaning that it's aligning to a standard where we know we're building in, say, application analytics, or we're building in logging and event management or exception management, we're building in crash management, we're building other types of things where the support team is not left in the dark around what's happening out in the field. And these four kind of components all really closely work together. And if you can have that part where you can take something that's very repeatable and make it faster, that ultimately means that you can take more risk. And you can go try applications where it doesn't take me 12 weeks or 16 weeks and $500,000 to try something. It takes me 6 weeks or 4 weeks, and it takes me 50 grand to go try something. And that is where we really see organizations that are accelerating have that opportunity because they're working from a playbook that everybody knows. Good example of that is FD, or Family Dollar, which is a company we've been working with for a long time. It's one of those examples where we started with an application that we knew was going to be valuable. It was actually an auditing application is where we started. That we knew was going to be valuable in the field. We knew there was a lot of hesitation initially around mobility. This is for their district managers, about 1,000 at that point. And there was a lot of hesitation around mobile, and this is the way we do it, and blah, 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 and all that kind of good stuff. We gave them an application that was inherently valuable, and it completely changed the metrics in terms of how they did store walks and other types of things. And it created an environment where it allowed us to build those standards out in terms of development, and ultimately they moved from laptops to iPads for those district managers. It went from I think we did an inventory first. There was a couple hundred different processes that they were working through there. We got that down, way down, just by trying to cut out unuseful tasks down to the core business of what those DMs did. And they have an extremely successful enterprise mobility program that now is extended to Dollar Tree with their acquisition or with a merger that allows them to extend out and continue to build valuable applications in a shorter period of time, which is a great success story. It's a good example of starting with a win and being able to parlay that into a significant amount of momentum. So before, I know, Stephen, you have a couple questions. One last thing just around why us, meaning us, Propelics and Convey. I think we've, both our companies have worked together through a lot of different successful clients. I think we've seen that we are able to have a really high speed to value, both in the short term, in terms of taking a small application idea, being able to build something that is very valuable, being able to have that integrated into enterprise systems very quickly and very scalably. And the same thing in terms of being able to extend that out in terms of a future-proof long-term, meaning that we start with something that's very contained and that can grow very quickly through other application ideas or as that grows in terms of scaling out the Convey platform, other types of things. We have a track record of delivering high ROI results in the Enterprise 1000. It's really where we work and across a lot of different industries. I think it's a good mix also from an expertise perspective, a lot of good transformational strategies across different industries and trying to be able to question and kind of work towards these different types of business processes, as well as good successful technical solutions that help enable those. And we've both been involved in strategies that are somewhat new in organizations that haven't really done too much within enterprise mobility, or a lot more in terms of recently in the last couple of years around rebooting, where we've had, we do some things under MDM, but we haven't really gone beyond that in any sort of meaningful type of way. So Stephen, we have a few minutes left. I know you want to talk a little bit around our offer for attendees and a couple questions.
That's right. What would you like first? You want the offer?
Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, so we're able to offer a special offer for webinar attendees today. If you'd like to schedule an individual session with Chikku and Erik to discuss case studies that are more relevant to your business, as well as discuss any mobile strategies that you want to consider, just go ahead and get that conversation started by emailing us at info@propelics.com. And so the first question for you guys, do you have any examples of how Day in the Life has helped inform your digital strategy direction in ways that maybe you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I could start with that. Chikku, you have something too. Yeah, we've always been surprised on Day in the Life. Usually Day in the Life, we're not going out into a specific user group, not having a preconceived notion. So we've had some conversations. We understand the back office systems, or we understand how they work a bit, and we're looking for patterns, or we're looking for specific benefits we think in a specific area. We've been on a couple. Maybe more often than not, we come back with results that shock us in terms of either the situation is much different from what we felt coming out of some of our initial conversations, our conference room conversations, if you will, and they're using systems in the field that are not approved, or they're storing information in their own system because a corporate one is terrible, or they're doing something along that lines, or we've gone out where the use case that we came back that we felt was the most valuable was totally different from the one that we went out into the field to go look at. I think a couple examples of that. One was, Stephen, one that you and I were at was up at an organization up in Michigan where we were doing an application roadmap. We were going to do, we're in the midst of doing a day in the life related to some manufacturing processes. And while we were on site, every meeting that we had started like 25 minutes late. And we started trying to understand why this happened.
Every single meeting.
Every single meeting. So every meeting was an hour-long schedule, but we only got through 30 minutes of things because everything started late. And the reason that was because the conference rooms were it was a complicated building structure, and people didn't know where they were, and all these different types of things. So we ended up still building the manufacturing app, and we also came back and we ended up building something related to just finding conference rooms. That I know is still in production there, and we had some things where we thought we took that number down by like 20 minutes or something on each meeting that started, which has to be high ROI, I would think. But there is always an opportunity for us to, when you start getting it out in the field and you start looking at how individuals work, what they know is happening in corporate and some of the systems that they have and their own personal way of doing things might be very different from others. And so we've always had the opportunity of being able to see and come back with different use case ideas, or even having a totally different opportunity to change metrics that we didn't think were even possible.
Yeah, I have one funny story around that. We did some work for an automotive parts for a manufacturing company, and I assumed that when we got down there we were going to be redesigning dashboard interfaces for the robots that fixed all these auto parts. But in fact, it was just like hundreds of old ladies that were fixing the parts with tools that they fashioned themselves out of like sticks. And I'm not even joking, like literally sticks. And they were just cleaning the gunk out. So we pivoted and we wound up building an app that improved community among auto people that the shop workers. And
wasn't a stick finding
like
app, was it?
It was not. We abandoned the stick idea. Okay, next question. Every time we get into rethinking an existing process and how to make it better, we get into this vicious cycle of, well, if we touch this process, then we'll have to go change that process. So to your point about small budgets and starting small, how would you recommend we put boundaries and get started?
Okay. I could take a shot to start, I guess. It's anytime that you're working to transform processes on a specific user group, you're obviously going to run into situations where I'm fixing one problem, but I have 99 problems, and so therefore I'm fixing one out of those 99. And so even if in a situation where I'm fixing a really good core business use case issue and a problem, I might still need my laptop in my other hand to go do these other types of things. That idea is very prevalent within enterprise mobility. The idea for that initial app, obviously, you need to have the context of what that user is doing throughout the day or throughout those different processes to understand if the application first has value standing on its own. And that can be very difficult in terms of finding what that first application is. And it needs to be a factor in determining what that first kind of area of a business process to go after. Most times, I think every time actually, we've clearly found areas that we can impact that don't necessarily upset the rest of the apple cart, so to speak. After you have that, and if you're going back to our idea around jumpstarting, if that's one of the first pieces you want to be able to do to be able to jumpstart, then the application roadmap that I talked about, then you would start looking at, okay, what are the processes that are happening overall in this user base? And when are those processes occurring? And are there ways for me to be able to balance out device usage or balance out that benefit? So example, like in my Family Dollar example, they were using laptops, which is fine. And then what the idea was is that we felt that we could drive their time from when they left the house to when they went to every retail organization and when they got back via mobility, providing with right analytics, communication, core system access, all the applications that we talked about, everything else. Like they could be very effective in the field with that. When they came home, we knew that there was going to be some after-hours work where they had to get into Excel to do some processes that we just couldn't be able to, just wasn't enough budget to do it all. And so we knew that there was going to be some home time or some laptop time, and still that was going to happen. So initially we went after, again, trying to go after a big chunks of time. Like we felt we could do everything between 8 and 5 or whatever that was to go after that first. And then after we had that solved, then we started looking at, okay, how do we get rid of these devices completely and not have the expectation of a home PC use of some sort and go after that. But the idea that the benefit, it can't be myopic. Like you can't have this kind of laser focus around what those benefits are. It has to be in the context of the use.
Great, thanks. And one question for Convey here. So looking for help around best practices regarding app upgrades for B2B and B2C. Question, do you force B2B users to always upgrade to each new release, or how do you handle that? How do you recommend handling that?
So typically what we find people doing is, yes, they would like for everyone of the B2B users to upgrade their apps, but that certainly does not happen all the time. And therefore, we have actually features in the platform that will allow you to recognize older versions and, write compatibility code. We make it easy for you to do that. So older versions of the app still continue to work because we have things around app version numbers and stuff that, makes it easy for you to identify that and take appropriate action.
Great. If we have time for one more. Coming from an organization that has failed a few times on getting their mobile strategy going, how would your Jumpstart approach vary from, approaches they may have tried in the past?
A lot of times that we've seen that those have failed is that typically, a lot of people consult around success stories in enterprise mobility. We've seen a lot of consulting say around building a mobile center of excellence or being able to build, internal organizational structures around mobile. I'm not saying those aren't valuable. They're clearly valuable. We do a lot of them. But anything that's created or anything that is proposed obviously needs to be appropriate in the context of the organization. And a lot of companies just can't say, hey, we're going to put this 4-person MCOE in or Center of Excellence in, and they're going to be the single point of governance around, around these processes. It just doesn't work that way. There has to be an understanding and a realization of what is realistic now and how do we grow this towards a vision over time. No different than what we talked about before on an application roadmap perspective. This is it's the things you saw in this webinar. Even though it's a short period of time, you can tell that there's a lot of different factors that fit into success in this area, and the benefits are huge. But there's a lot of ways that these things can get off the rails, whether that's based off of ownership or individuals or being too aggressive or trying to force too much governance or other types of things that can impact this idea around building a culture of transformation or through innovation and things like that. So I would first look at what were some of the things that were attempted, where those items failed, and try to make sure we're not obviously repeating those. In our experience, most of those have been either based off of going after use cases that aren't truly valuable in some of the things that we talked about today and the drivers that we're going after, or they're not, again, going into your other question, they're something that is built around a small process, but it doesn't really help in terms of a larger process or other types of things that still need to be done in more traditional methods. Or they were built around, building an empire around enterprise mobility. And it doesn't need that. It needs to start with something small and start building momentum, and it usually will take off on its own. Those are typically the ways that we've seen these things fail. And so try to first learn those and try to obviously make sure we don't repeat those.
Great. Well, it looks like we are just about out of time here, so thank you so much, Chikku and Erik, and thanks everyone else for hopping on here.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.